The road home. I don't remember it being this long. Of course, I never wanted to get back as badly as I do now. Must also be the calm after. Everything up on the mountain was so loud. Now it's just the quiet left. My mind must be needing to remember what it felt like to be normal. It's been so scattered lately. Foggy. Daniel finished this thought as he finally emerged from the thick layer of fog he had been walking through for the past hour, its edges twirling slowly behind like curling fingers reaching after him, but finally letting go of their grasp. The young man removed his hat to wipe away the gathering moisture from his forehead and brushed his brown hair back before replacing it. Finally, I can barely see anything in front of me, Daniel thought to himself as he looked around, his amber eyes scanning the familiar surroundings. Oh, good. I recognize this place. Daniel breathed a slight sigh of relief. Whew. He was glad he had not taken a wrong turn and walked down a different road in the cover of the fog. The soldier switched his musket strap over to his other shoulder, relieving his tired arm of its weight, and continued his trek down the road. Beggar's Cat should only be a day or two away now. Daniel could not wait to see the small town, knowing he wouldn't be able to contain his smile when he came around the corner and finally saw the familiar buildings of his home. He imagined everyone waving and running to greet him, opening the door to his home to see the surprised looks on his family's faces, embracing them with tears of joy and relief running down his cheeks. It was so close now, yet still felt so very far away. Daniel's expectations were continuously drawn out with every twist and turn of the road. The familiarity of the surrounding terrain continued to trick him, making the man think he was getting closer, yet his goal always seemed just beyond his reach. The sighs of disappointment were frequent, yet the drive to see his family pushed him forward, never stopping until the sun began to set and he could feel the waves of sleep drag him down. Daniel was so tired of walking. He had always been so tired. Tired of war, tired of seeing his fellow soldiers dying around him, tired of the fear he had felt every night. Thankfully, however, he no longer felt this lingering dread. When the soldier first began his march back from Lookout Mountain, he couldn't help the creeping feelings of paranoia that kept his eyes on the tree line around him. Although he felt ecstatic after hearing the news that the war had finally ended, the years of fighting had conditioned the soldier to expect danger and death around every corner. This feeling had only intensified after his close call when he took a bullet in the gut. He remembered the pain, the fear he felt when the lead struck him, his panicked mind recalling the last moments of other soldiers suffering from such a wound and their final spoken words, reaching out for their loved ones that were miles away, nowhere near as they slowly drifted into the next life. Daniel, however, had been lucky. A miracle had happened that day, and the soldier survived a wound that he should not have. Thankfully, the pain of the ordeal had caused Daniel to pass out, and when he woke, the bullet had been removed and his body bandaged. As Daniel recalled this memory for the 100th time, he quietly mumbled another prayer under his breath. The man gave his thanks to God every day for saving him and giving him a chance to see his family again. Most were not so lucky, and Daniel could not understand why he survived and others didn't. But God has a plan. I survived for a reason, Daniel thought to himself as he continued, whatever that may be. The lone wanderer came around the corner of the road, his heart skipping a beat, as usual, expecting once again to see the edges of his town, but instead found another man. Sitting on the side of the road, the stranger rubbed his neck and took a sip from his canteen. He coughed into his hand and looked up as Daniel approached. There had been a moment of hesitation and doubt as Daniel thought of reaching for his weapon, but the gray color of the man's Confederate uniform stayed his hand and put his mind at ease. Howdy, the man greeted. Daniel nodded as he approached. Hello, he greeted back. You're the first person I've seen in 2 days. Where are you heading? The man stood and pointed down the road. Home like everyone else. Dawson. Oh, I know Dawson. That's near my hometown Beggar's Catch.
The stranger grinned. The smile was bright, yet his teeth dirty. He had messy brown hair and bright blue eyes. The man was quite young, probably still in his teens. So many like him had been called to battle, yet would unfortunately never come home. This young man would, however, lucky to still have his whole life ahead of him.
Oh, I've been there before. Made a trip there with Pa for some seed a couple of times. I always liked the place. Connor.
He coughed and then reached out to shake Daniel's hand.
Daniel.
Daniel shifted the uncomfortable weight of his rifle again before continuing.
You minding some company for the walk back? Company sounds good. Been mighty boring of a trip. Everything's been so quiet now, I don't know what to do with myself.
Daniel chuckled and the two began to walk, Connor moving a bit slower from a limp in his step. The soldier used a large branch as a walking stick to hobble forward, which caused Daniel to sigh with impatience, quietly regretting the invitation, but he still gave the wounded man a worried look.
Your leg all right?
He asked, concerned.
Yes, sir.
Caught a bullet, but got it patched up. Could have been worse. Didn't lose the leg after all. Daniel laughed at that.
That's true. Mostly just restless now and finding it hard to sleep.
Got used to the distant sound of battle.
I understand that. Surprising as that is, the still of it is more unnerving than the guns and cannons. Even missing the ruckus of camp. Guessing you was on lookout then?
Daniel nodded.
I was. You?
Same. Quite a battle, wasn't it?
What I could see for sure. Fighting in and above the clouds was something else. There's hundreds of flashes of fire through that thickness and the whizzing of bullets going by, striking the cliffs near you. Only thing we could do was aim where we saw their flashes and heard their voices, hoping our shots struck truer than theirs. Useless to use the cannons if we couldn't see them. We got a little creative, though. When we heard them below us, we even started tossing stones over to save ammo.
I'm honestly surprised anyone was getting hit. At one point, I swore Happy Jackie took a shot to the head. Seen his hat fly off and expected half his face to be missing. But he turned and looked at me with a smile and just started shooting again. And that laugh of his after sent shivers down my spine. Daniel turned to face Connor with a surprised look on his face. He had heard of this soldier before. A real legend. Responsible for killing dozens of Union soldiers and even a couple of officers. Surviving things no one else could. Apparently, even stole and cooked up Hooker's horse.
You fought with Happy Jackie?
Yes, sir. The man then glanced around and began to whisper the next part for some reason, as if someone would hear him. To be honest, I personally never liked him. Always creeped me out. Something about the man. Well, something wasn't right. Always seemed a bit off. Too many chickens in his coop, if you know what I mean. He was a good soldier, though. Great soldier. Always an inspiration to the troops, even if he did love killing just a bit too much. Saved a lot of lives with his stunts. Mine, too. Took that bullet to my leg, and he dragged me off the battlefield while I was bleeding and told me I wasn't done yet. Told me there was so much more killing to do. Told me to come back to the battle even if I had to hop on one leg. Said being a cripple don't stop none from being a killer. Connor snorted and laughed. I bet he could have won the war for us all by himself if he wanted. Just set loose like Carter's attack dog.
I had no idea he was up there with us. Would have loved to see him in action.
Daniel admitted as the two continued down the road. The two wandering soldiers had spent the day passing the time by telling their tales to each other on their journey down the winding road. The swaying of the autumn trees showered them with golden leaves as they walked, the comfortable winds gently pushing and pulling the field of grass beyond the wooden fence to their right. They hadn't been paying too much attention to the road or the time, and before they knew it, the sun was beginning to set beyond the stretching horizon. The two soldiers decided to set up camp for the night, spreading out their bedrolls, nailing their tents into the ground, and sparking up a fire. Connor's face lit up when Daniel removed the last 2 onions and loaf of bread he had in his pack and began working on a French onion soup. The smell of the fresh onion was one thing, but after a while, the slow-cooking soup began to emit a new aroma, one that made both men's mouth water in anticipation and impatience. The two soldiers had been mostly living off the pemmican rations they carried around for the last few days, but because of the recent camaraderie, Daniel decided to share his food as a celebration of sorts.
God's grace, does that smell good?
Connor stated as he stared longingly at the soup as it thickened with flavor. Daniel smiled and twirled his mustache while he cooked. When the meal was ready, he spooned some into a wooden bowl.
The real question is, does it taste good?
He asked Connor as he passed him the bowl. The young man smiled even wider and practically giggled with excitement. Daniel tore the bread loaf in half and passed it to the other man, and after taking a bite, Connor's eyes teared up.
That is the best thing I've ever tasted, he claimed and slowly shook his head. Nothing deserves to be that good. You understand me? Nothing deserves to taste anywhere near as good as that tastes.
Connor leaned back and pressed his body against the tree. He made a visible face of relief when he took the weight off his leg.
You been struggling with the walk. You all right?
Yes, sir. Still healing up. Thought I was a goner when it happened, but the sawbones did their job that day with me. Pa always said I was lucky. Daniel laughed as he held the warm bowl of food in his own hands. Did I say how good this food was?
To a starving man, anything will taste good,
he told Connor as he took a bite himself. The unnaturally delicious flavors exploded in his mouth, and he took a deep sigh.
I will say, that is surprisingly good.
The two men laughed as they devoured their meals. After their dinner, the soldiers lay on the ground next to their warm fire, quietly staring up at the stars in the night sky with full bellies and humble smiles. Occasionally, a shooting star would streak across the heavens and draw from the men a response of wonder. This peaceful moment was interrupted, however, when the nearby sound of snapping twigs and the rustling of foliage began to close in on the two. They both sat up and began to reach for their guns when a voice shouted out,
"Hold it! I'm unarmed. I don't mean no trouble."
It claimed from the darkness beyond the light of their fire. Daniel hesitated a moment, his hand still on his musket.
"Come on out, then. Quit your lurking,"
Daniel shouted. His eyes narrowed as he stared into the darkness, locking onto the silhouette of the approaching figure. When the unknown man finally came into view, he had his hands up in a sign of peace. When Daniel spotted the rugged and ripped dark blue of the Union uniform, he quickly glanced over at Connor, both their eyes filled with uncertainty.
"Didn't mean to spook you. Just saw the fire and was wondering if I could take a moment to warm up. I know we're wearing different colors, but the war's over. Just trying to get back home. Like you."
The Union soldier said, still holding his hands up. He nervously glanced back and forth from Connor to Daniel, and after a long silence, with only the sound being that of the flickering flames, Daniel spoke up.
"You can sit. Don't you go trying nothing, though,"
he told the man as he cautiously leaned back. The Union soldier slowly lowered his hands and instead placed them near the fire as he squatted.
"Thank you kindly, friend. Mighty kind of you."
He stared into Daniel's eyes for a moment, before shuddering slightly and rubbed his hands together.
"Name's Henry."
"Daniel. This is Connor."
Henry nodded to them both and went back to warming his hands. After another awkward pause, Connor spoke up.
"So, Henry, where'd you come from? Looks like you just came out of the woods."
"Oh, I was a bit lost, I guess you could say. Got turned around. Went down the wrong road and wound up wandering down a path I shouldn't have been on. Been sleeping in the forest for a while and probably would be still if I hadn't seen the light of your fire. Thanks again."
"It's no problem,"
Daniel replied and studied the man. His uniform had been shredded as if it had been caught in the thorns, briars, and stray branches of the forest. He was absolutely filthy, his beard unkempt, and a foul odor wafted off him, one that could keep the Confederate forces at bay. He must have been in the forest for quite some time.
"I reckon you weren't at lookout then if you was out here."
Henry shook his head. You a deserter? Connor asked bluntly. The Union soldier stopped rubbing his hands and looked at Connor.
No. Well,
I don't know.
maybe. I don't know what I am. Not no more. The killing, I couldn't deal with it anymore. Just couldn't. Not after.
He began to trail off, and his body went still, his words quiet, his eyes staring into the past, a past filled with regret. Daniel and Connor glanced at each other again. After what? Connor asked him. Henry's eyes blinked as he returned to himself, and he gave a wary smile.
Nothing.
A long silence passed between the soldiers in the camp.
I hate to ask, but either of y'all have any food?
Just half a bar of pemmican. Here. Connor pulled the food from his bag and passed it to Henry, who nodded in appreciation. The man quickly gobbled up everything he had and chewed silently, some of the food still caught in his unkempt beard. After he finished and swallowed the last bite, Henry's eyes began to focus on the fire again, that long, cold, and distant stare returning.
Can I ask you for something else?
Daniel, slightly annoyed, reached for some more food. Henry just shook his head.
Not food. Forgiveness.
Daniel and Connor exchanged a puzzled look.
Forgiveness? For what?
Daniel asked him, curious. Henry glanced up from the fire.
For what I did during the war. I did some terrible things. Never wanted to, but I had to. I did what I was told to do. But I should have known better.
It's war.
Daniel responded.
Everyone does what they must if they want to survive. What they're ordered to do. We may be on different sides, but we're still just soldiers. We know each other's pain. We know the others don't want to be there. Same as everyone else. All of us the same. Bleed the same blood.
Henry sat quietly as Daniel finished and took another long moment before speaking up.
I know. I still need forgiveness. I can confess to God, but it's not the same. He might forgive, but he never answers back. Not to me, at least. I want to ask someone who can grant me the forgiveness I seek from someone who have helped hurt. Please.
Henry's eyes looked tired and his face sunken with sadness. Daniel nodded lightly.
Okay.
He whispered to Henry. The Union soldier took several moments before continuing.
About a month ago, we came across a town far from here. Many miles. God, it seems like I've just been walking forever since. In this town, we discovered some families were hiding some Johnny Rebs. So we pulled them and their families from their homes. And my superior, he told us he wanted to make an example for everyone. The price for hiding the soldiers. He had us line up to shoot them. I didn't want to. None of us wanted to, but we did. And after that, I couldn't deal with it no more. I put my gun against my head and pulled the trigger, but it didn't go off. Out of all the times to have a misfire, I just cried after that. And then started walking. I couldn't do it no more. Just left it behind, and they just let me go. They didn't even try to stop me. I could feel their eyes on my back as I went, too. They knew I was a broken man. They knew there was no point in going after me. And I've just been walking since. Thought my feet was taking me home, but I don't know no more. So I ask you, can you forgive a man like me?
Daniel and Connor stared across the flickering flames at the shell of the man, a single tear slowly dripping down his dirty cheek. Daniel sat up and walked over to Henry. He kneeled before him and placed a hand on his shoulder.
If God can, then, and I can too,
Daniel told him. Henry's face lifted and his eyes closed. A sense of relief washed over him. Henry slowly opened his eyes and his lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for everything.
With that, the Union soldier stood and glanced at the other two.
I won't take up no more of your time. We all have a long journey ahead of us. I hope you get home soon. May God bless you on your travels.
Henry turned and began to walk down the road, now within the man's sight, keeping his back to them until he vanished into the darkness. The next day, the two soldiers woke to a misty morning. A light rain had fallen earlier as they slept, and the ground outside their tents was coated with a light layer of dew. They both quickly packed up their campsite, finished off the last of their pemmican for breakfast, and began their walk back down the dirt road. They were more silent than the previous day, their thoughts lingering on the night before. This quiet was suddenly interrupted when Connor began to sing a song as they walked. Daniel found his voice again and began to sing along. The tune filled the surrounding scenery with even more life, and the world almost seemed to join in. The forest swayed and danced as the wind carried the men's song with it wherever it went. And high in the sky, a barely visible rainbow hung over them as they walked, the colors of the world beginning to bloom with vibrancy for every hour that passed. About halfway through the day, the soldiers came to a large wooden bridge. One Daniel recognized, and just as he was about to point it out, a sudden force almost knocked his feet out from under him. A barking dog bolted past the two men and stopped on the other side, its lolling tongue hanging out of its mouth as it stared at Daniel, whose eyes went wide with recognition.
Oh, hey, I know that dog. That's my neighbor's dog, Copper. Copper, hey, come here, boy.
Daniel told Connor in excitement and whistled after the dog. He knew this meant Beggar's Catch was even closer now.
Oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. Couldn't do with another day of trekking.
The two men crossed the wooden bridge in a hurry, and as they reached the other side, Connor pointed at a fork in the road. Two signs pointed down each road, one towards Beggar's Catch and another to Haymark. Daniel felt a smile spread across his face as he spotted the sign. But as he stepped forward, however, he heard Connor speak up behind him.
Something's not right. I can't do this. Not yet,
he told Daniel, his eyes on the road to Haymark. Daniel turned to face him with a puzzled look.
What do you mean?
He replied as he shifted the uncomfortable weight of his gun again. Connor stared at the road as if in a hypnotic trance, his eyes unblinking and his body stiff.
Connor? You okay there?
Connor slowly looked at Daniel.
I'm not ready yet.
I need to go back. I can still help.
What do you mean?
There's still wounded that need fixing. There's still people that need to rebuild. Just because the war's over don't mean we have to stop helping each other. Everyone needs all the help they can get right now. I have to go back. I need to. I can't give up on them.
So, you're just gonna walk all the way back? What about your leg? And you don't even have enough food. How are you gonna make it there?
Connor patted his musket. I can still hunt. I know what plants to eat. What's what? I can find something. I'll survive. I can catch a carriage in Haymark. The ride should make the trip much quicker. As for my leg, well, being a cripple don't stop none from being a builder. Might make the going a bit slower, but still. Daniel just stared at him with a look of bewilderment.
That's a long walk back, though. Are you sure you want to do this? You've given so much already. No one would blame you for wanting a moment of peace.
I want to help while I still have it in me. I need to do this. Daniel let out a long sigh, slowly shaking his head.
Well, I won't stop you. I mean, I think it's admirable for you to do that. You're a good man, Connor. I'll miss your company. You, want me to swing by Dawson and let your folks know you're all right?
Connor smiled and waved his hand. Thanks, but no. I'll get home when I get home. I'll send them a letter and let them know what's going on, though. Thank you, Daniel. The two of them shook hands, and Daniel watched as Connor began to walk down the road, which would eventually circle back to Lookout Mountain.
When you come back by this neck of the woods, feel free to stop by and say hello.
Daniel called after Connor, who waved and shouted back without turning around. We'll see each other again, in this life or the next. Daniel continued his walk that day, alone, missing the company he had, but made good progress nonetheless. At least, he thought he had. Once again, the road just seemed to stretch on, seemingly never-ending. Daniel began to grow quite impatient as he walked mile after mile, constantly shifting his gun back and forth, the weight of it starting to become a burden for his aching shoulders. The man pressed on, however, convincing himself he would reach Beggar's Catch soon.
This is taking forever,
he thought to himself.
I know impatience can make things worse, but this is just ridiculous.
As he rounded the corner, however, he came across a building, at least the makings of a building. There were several people that were clearly in the process of building a home near the road that wrapped around a huge and open field. As Daniel approached, one of them looked up and saw him.
Well, hey there, traveler. You looking tired? Want to put your feet up and rest for a bit? Got some fresh lemonade and some food if you're wanting for it. Anything to help our soldiers feel our gratitude.
One politely offered as Daniel neared the edge of the field.
Oh, well, that's mighty kind of you. I won't say no to that.
Daniel responded, whipping his gun off his shoulder and placed it against his pack. He walked over and shook the hand of the man who had made the offer.
Name's Daniel. Opie Baker,
the man replied and pointed as a woman approached.
This is my wife, Clarissa, 2 sons, Jeb and Marcus, and our daughter, Tulip.
All the kids ran up in excitement to greet the stranger. One immediately pointed at his gun resting nearby.
Oh, did you fight in the war?
Jeb asked, his eyes filling with curiosity. Daniel nodded.
I did. Was up on lookout during the last battle.
The children all expressed wonder.
Did you shoot anyone?
The mother slapped one upside the back of the head.
Shh! Don't be rude, Jeb. Asking people a question like that makes a fella uncomfortable.
Daniel chuckled.
It's fine,
he told them and turned to the child.
I'm honestly not sure. It was hard to see through the clouds. That's what we was fighting in. We was up high on that mountain, see? So high we was in and above the clouds.
Jeb's mouth dropped open in awe.
Wow, that's amazing! Were you able to touch the stars at night? We wasn't up that high.
Daniel told Jeb with another chuckle.
Ain't no man gonna be able to reach the sky. Not without dying first.
I will. One day I was gonna find a way to reach them. I was gonna collect them in a jar, you'll see.
Jeb said defiantly with his hands on his hips. His whole family chuckled. After a moment, Clarissa returned with a glass of lemonade and a bowl of pumpkin soup, the bowl being the pumpkin itself.
Fancy. I like that. Thank you kindly, ma'am.
He told her and quickly finished the drink and meal, which was unreasonably tasty. The lemonade was the finest he had ever had, the sour taste lingering long after he finished the drink. When he was done, Daniel offered his services to help them finish the floor they were working on, as thanks for the meal. The Baker family tried to tell him there was no need, but Daniel insisted on helping. It didn't take too long, about an hour and a half until they finished up. But with his help, the time was significantly shortened. As they wrapped up for the day, the family invited Daniel to stay the night, and while impatient to get back to his own family, he accepted. Daniel and Opie sat on a fallen tree that the family felled to use as the wood for their home, talking about anything that came to mind. Opie packed his pipe with tobacco as they spoke, took a couple of puffs, and then passed it to Daniel. The tasty smoke filled his lungs as the soldier stared into the night across the field at the dozens of fireflies that lit up the world.
Beautiful spot to build a home. Good choice,
Daniel told Opie before passing the pipe back.
Thanks. We was walking for a while before deciding on this place. When the war ended, we knew many people would be looking for new land to build on, so we jumped at the chance to find the perfect place before anyone else could. This spot seemed to be the right one. Just kind of called to us.
Was a good choice.
Mm-hmm.
The father took another puff and exhaled.
Any plans for when you finally get home?
Not yet. Just want to see the family first. That's all I can think about. I'm getting so impatient that my mind's starting to make this trip stretch on for a little too long. I keep thinking that I'm close, but apparently still far out.
The road you walking on is a long one,
Opie responded as he stared over to it.
Much longer when you're wanting for something.
I did see my neighbor's dog, though, so I must be getting close. At least, I think it was my neighbor's dog. Hoping so.
I know you's wanting to see your family again. I get it. But don't forget to take a glance at the world around you. You might not be going nowhere, but it's good to give yourself a moment of peace. War seems to drain the light from men's eyes and take the wonder from their souls. Don't let it take yours. Look at the beauty of this place. You deserve your moment. Enjoy the journey.
Daniel listened to the wise words from Opie and stared across the field again, and then up at the stars above his head.
Home is just around that corner. You'll get there. Just you wait. Every road ends eventually. None of them can go on forever.
When morning came, Daniel packed up his camp quietly, trying his best to not disturb the sleeping family. As he turned to leave, he decided to write a quick note expressing his thanks for the family's kindness. When he finished, Daniel folded the paper and placed it under a rock near the parents' tent. He put away his pencil, picked up his pack again, and looped his arms through both straps before reaching for his gun. It felt so heavy in his hands, even heavier on his shoulder.
I'm so tired of carrying this around,
he thought as he began his seemingly never-ending walk down the dirt road. The autumn forest around him hugged the road as he walked, and the trees' fallen leaves seemed to cast the world into an eternal golden color. Opie's words from last night soon had Daniel absent-mindedly admiring the beauty without a single thought intruding, not even of his family. In this moment, it was just him and his surroundings. The only sound during his walk was the crunching of the golden leaves beneath his boots. The forest suddenly opened to a beautiful field filled with golden wheat that swayed in the wind. Daniel smiled and stared ahead of him to the end of the long road. Near the edge of another forest, he spotted a small shack next to a closed gate. Daniel could barely make out a single figure on the porch, fiddling with something in his hands. This peaceful moment began to drift away with the winds as the weight of his gun suddenly began to cause some serious throbbing pain in his shoulder, forcing him to remove it. Instead, Daniel began to simply hold the weapon in his hands as he walked, but it wasn't long before the weight seemed to become almost unnaturally heavy. There was a sudden pulling sensation on the weapon, and the gun slipped from his grasp, falling to the ground with an audible thud. As Daniel reached for it, he found he was struggling with lifting it from the ground, almost as if the metal of the musket was being pulled by some kind of magnetic force. It took everything Daniel had to lift it back up and begin to make his way down the road, struggling with each step. By the time he reached the shack, the soldier was forced to drop the weapon again, staring at it, curious.
What in the world is wrong with me? Am I sick or something? Why am I so weak?
As he began to reach down to attempt to pick up the rifle again, a voice called out to him.
"Hello there, Wanderer."
It spoke with an ancient but gentle tone. Daniel looked up to see an old man with white hair and a beard sitting on the front porch, whittling away on a piece of wood. Daniel gave a stiff and awkward wave to the old man.
Hello yourself.
He responded and took a moment to relax again.
I don't suppose you know how close I am to Beggar's Catch, do you?
The old man pointed at the road, which was blocked by a metal gate painted white.
"Just through there.
Almost home," he replied while finishing up his project. The old man's face looked puzzled as he watched Daniel struggle with lifting his weapon again.
"Why are you carrying that weapon with you?"
Daniel stood and stared back at the man, sweat pouring down his face.
Well, I was a soldier. Just left lookout. We all had one of these.
He told him in confusion.
Did you not notice the uniform?
The old man continued to stare at him.
"I saw. Just a curious thing. Why do you think you need that weapon?"
What? What do you mean?
Just wondering why you think you need that here. The war is over. You don't need that anymore.
Well, I disagree. A man still has the right to carry. Needs to hunt to feed himself. Needs to be able to protect his family.
The old man's curious face suddenly changed and filled with realization. He placed the knife on the ground and stood, slowly walking over to Daniel. The old man stopped only a couple of feet from the soldier, his eyes scanning Daniel up and down.
Is something wrong?
The old man's mouth twitched slightly, and his eyes suddenly seemed as if they were filled with sorrow.
You don't know where you are, do you? You didn't notice the transition. I've seen people before that had doubts make it this far, but you have no clue. You don't know what's happened.
Daniel stared back at him, completely confused at this point.
What do you mean? What are you getting at?
The old man smiled and placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder.
It's okay.
Daniel stared at his hand and then slowly back at the old man.
What is?
I want you to know it's okay. You don't have to be scared. There's nothing to fear here. Just let it out.
Let what out? Not trying to be rude, old man, but what are you talking about?
You'll have to admit it before you can go. I know you know, somewhere deep inside, you know the answer to what I'm trying to tell you. But you will have to admit it. Not to me, to yourself.
Admit what?
It's okay. Just say it. Say what you know to be true. Really dig deep into yourself and find the truth. Then admit it. Listen to what your soul is trying to tell you.
Daniel felt a strange and sudden feeling he left buried deep inside. He had felt it before when he had taken the bullet to his gut, but since then, the soldier had simply forgotten it. Then that same feeling began to creep up again.
No,
he told the old man, who continued to smile and gave Daniel's shoulder a gentle squeeze.
no.
It's okay. Daniel began to slowly shake his head again.
No. It's not real. It didn't happen.
It did. It happens to everyone eventually. It happened to me. It happened to you. Just say it. Don't let your doubt have any more power over you. Let go. Once you do, you'll be truly free. There is nothing to be afraid of. Daniel stepped back and continued to shake his head.
No, I don't want to. There ain't no way. If it were true, then what have I been doing since the war ended? I don't want to. I died, didn't I?
The old man closed his eyes. Yes, Daniel. You did. No one survives a wound like yours. But unlike most, your mind, your soul, it could not comprehend what happened to your body. So it continued to walk down the road for the lost. The road that eventually leads home. To heaven. Daniel stared up at the old man and then to the gate nearby. His eyes widened and filled with tears as he collapsed to the ground. It all made sense now. Everything. He didn't want to admit it, but it was true.
Is that really the gates to heaven? Are you St. Peter?
The old man smiled and held his hand out to help Daniel up. I am.
But I can't, though. Not without my family.
Peter's smile faltered slightly. They're already here, Daniel. They were here before you. Daniel's eyes filled with surprise and horror when hearing this.
What do you mean they were here before? Did something happen to them?
Peter gave a slight nod. Your wife and some others in Beggar's Catch tried to hide some deserters. And when the Union soldiers found out, Peter didn't finish that sentence, knowing Daniel already knew what he meant. You met the man who helped send them on their way. He could not live with himself, so he took his own life and was left wandering away from the guidance of the road until he found the redemption he sought. He was looking for you, Daniel. Daniel's eyes streamed with tears and he let out a sharp gasp. Henry. Yes. He was broken, and your forgiveness fixed him and sent him on his way. Do you still forgive him, knowing what he has done? Daniel felt many emotions upon hearing this shocking information, but after a long moment.
Yes,
I do. I want to be angry, but I understand. I feel sorry for him, and I forgive him.
Peter smiled.
Good. Daniel, you no longer need your weapon. Your fight is over. You will never need to feel worry or pain or loss again. Welcome home, Daniel, Peter said to him and handed the man a small wooden key, the one he had just finished carving. Go to your family. Daniel's journey had changed. A feeling of heavenly wonderment filled his soul. When he turned that key and stepped through the gates, he felt free. A freedom like he had never felt before. Joy he had never felt. The fear and pain left him at the gates, and now it was just him and whatever would come next. The gold in the world around was pure and endless. The sky above him filled with radiance and power, and when he finally reached the end of the road, the sight before him showed him the wonders of the kingdom of heaven. The mighty golden sun sent ripples of colored light out every second, and matched in perfect synchronicity with it were the waves of gentle scented winds that drifted across the endless fields of blue roses that churned and swayed, resembling an ocean. It was as if the entirety of God's realm and those that inhabited it were breathing the breath of life together. The clouds above Daniel's head were constantly changing color from blue to pink to gold and white, flying between the wisps of clouds that carried golden cities were angelic beings, more beautiful and wondrous than he could ever imagine. Some resembled flawlessly sculpted humans, while others were made of feathery wings and eyes and golden rings. There was an endless song of unimaginable beauty that filled the realm, completing the ambience of this otherworldly place. Is this real? Am I really here? Daniel's thoughts were pulled away with the wind when he turned his head and spotted his house, perfectly placed within the ocean of blue roses. His heart skipped a beat when he saw his wife and son slowly making their way towards him, smiles on their faces, their joy and love visibly radiating from them. Any doubts left Daniel's mind as he turned to face them. I'm home,